Hello, EDLS candidates, 732, my Thomasville crew. It was great being with you this past weekend. I enjoyed meeting you and getting to know you a little bit. So in large measure, this week 4 video is a follow-up that weekend, as well as some thoughts about the assignments and the readings and the writing for this week. So in week 3, covering the time that we met, I had incorporated the discussion board in the weekend lesson. So you don't complete a discussion board during the face-to-face meetings. I have them loaded here, and you would have done that if we hadn't met, talked about it face-to-face. You don't need to go back and load something now. So that's the way I'll try to do it when we meet face-to-face. I still want to talk about those topics, but we'll talk about it face-to-face. In week 4, February 5th through the 11th, where we are now, you are to read Glickman chapters 13 and 14. So we went from supervision and vision in the beginning there and skipping ahead to 13 and 14 planning, as well as that Victoria Bernhardt monograph, the little 4-pager that I gave you on multiple measures. Those are the readings for this week. In Glickman, in chapter 13, on page 229, figure 13.4 looks like this. And that is, I kept talking on the weekend about the PDSA cycle, or continuous improvement, and Deming, you remember, in God we trust, all others bring data. Deming's Short cycle, or the PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle of continuous improvement, is the philosophy, is the theory driving your work on the CNA and on the larger curriculum audit here. We assess the current state. We do a needs assessment. You'll see in the figure, it says right there, we do a needs assessment. We make a plan. In this case, you're making recommendations. You're not actually implementing the plan. Folks would then implement the plan and study the results, and that's the continuous improvement cycle. So you're doing the needs assessment and the planning parts here, and you know that in many cases then you do have to go on and create an action plan and do the things that you say you're going to do. I didn't have a discussion board for chapter 14, but on pages 260 and 261, this is the kind of thinking that is driving your CIIP again. Naming your team and determining who will evaluate the curriculum, determining what questions need to be answered, what is the current state of the curriculum, what is the current state of curriculum guides, what is the current state of instructional strategies that we're teaching to our teachers, what is the current state of formative and summative assessments in place for teachers, what data will be gathered and how. Again, this is the 260, 261, this is your process cookbook, another explanation for how you are to implement the CIIP. So I thought there was some good stuff in chapters 13 and 14 in Glickman on the planning portion, and that is the planning model that you're using in your CIIP. So if you need to cite research as to why you're doing what you're doing, cite Glickman. And again, my thinking here is that if you are describing how you're collecting your data, how you're analyzing your data, what tools you might use. Can you use a fishbone chart or a nominal group technique? We did it very quickly, but do you know how we compared our 3 different sets of survey questions in class and combined those? That, if we were to describe what happened there, that's the methodology section, how we determine in which we're going to be the survey questions for that little 10-question PLC survey that we created in class. Describing the how-to, how we determine those questions, sitting in groups, picking our own sets of questions, looking for commonalities, picking those that had three in all, one in all three columns, or picking the next ones that had two, the same ones in two columns. That was our methodology for determining what the survey questions were going to be. So describing what you're doing. And the Bernhardt monograph, you have a copy in your hands now. We did a little bit of work with that. I hope that you'll remember that Tina modeled for us how you can use several different pieces of data and look for overlapping commonalities. She calls them multiple measures, overlapping measures of data. So we saw in Tina's example how discipline came up in both the district report card and also in the perceptual data from the TWC. That was that overlapping measures, two or more measures, kind of zeroing in that there might be an issue here about discipline in the district. John went straight to a response, which was good. We need to make recommendations to improve the areas that can be improved. Look first, and the idea here in this discussion board post is to review the data that you have for your CNA and look for an example of an intersection of two or more measures. Again, with Tina's data, we saw the discipline was something that overlapped in two or more measures. What kinds of issues do you see popping up in your data? And try to give us an example of an intersection of two or more measures from your data. So Glickman, think about some tools that you might use and the methodology that you might use for your CIIP, and try to recycle that post into your CIIP if you can. Look at Bernhardt's multiple measures and see how you can incorporate that into your CIIP as well. Respond, please, with a couple of data sets and think about, again, how you might use that later. Keep working on your CIIP, please. The formative draft of your Part A is due in just 2 weeks, coming up at the end of week 5, I think. So we didn't go over the course calendar, but it is over here. And yes, in week 5, I'm going to be looking for your CIIP Part A to read it and give you some formative feedback on that. So in just a couple of weeks, that's going to be due to me. So keep working on that stuff, please. And that's it for week 4. Please write or call. We will Zoom again in about another week. But in the meantime, please write or call if you have questions. Keep up with your reading. Keep up with the work, please. I hope by the time we meet again, you will have had at least one meeting with your team and have done some analysis of data for that CNA. Thank you, and have a great week. My Tar Heels aren't doing very well, but I won't mention that.